Right now, somewhere in your body, a wave is rising. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A text message lands wrong. A memory surfaces uninvited. Your chest tightens. Your face goes hot. You feel it take over. But here's the strange part. That wave, biologically, only lasts 90 seconds. After that, you're not feeling an emotion anymore. You're choosing one. In 1996, a Harvard-trained neuroanatomist named Jill Bolte Taylor suffered a massive stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain. She was 37 years old, and she watched in real time as her ability to speak, move, and think in language dissolved. What she experienced instead was something she hadn't expected. Waves of pure feeling, unfiltered by thought, washing through her and then leaving. She later measured it. From the moment a trigger hits your body to the moment the chemical flood clears out of your bloodstream, it takes about a minute and a half. 90 seconds, that's it. That's the entire biological lifespan of a feeling. So why does your anger last for hours? Why does grief follow you for weeks? Why do you replay the same argument in your head at 2 a.m. 3 days after it happened? Because you're not riding the wave anymore. You're rebuilding it. Here's what's actually happening inside you. When something triggers an emotional response, your amygdala, the almond-shaped structure buried deep in your brain, fires a chemical alarm. Hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense. This is not a metaphor. It is a physiological event, as real and as temporary as a sneeze. And like a sneeze, it has a natural endpoint. The chemicals get metabolized. The wave passes. Your body, left alone, will always return to baseline. But your body is rarely left alone. Your mind interrupts. The moment the physical wave starts to fade, your thoughts step in and ask the wave to stay. You replay the moment. You rehearse what you should have said. You imagine the argument continuing, escalating, vindicating you. And every time you do that, you trigger the amygdala again, a fresh wave, a new 90 seconds, stacked on top of the last one and the one before that, until what should have been a minute and a half of discomfort becomes an entire afternoon of misery, entirely self-generated. Psychologist James Gross, who has spent decades at Stanford studying what's called emotion regulation, found something that lines up perfectly with this. The people best at managing difficult feelings weren't the ones who suppressed them. Suppression, it turns out, often backfires, keeping the stress response elevated even longer. The people who recovered fastest were the ones who could simply notice a feeling, name it, and let it move through them without grabbing the wheel and steering it back into the storm. Think about the last time you watched a small child get hurt. They cry hard for a minute or two, and then, astonishingly, they're laughing again, chasing a butterfly, the tears still wet on their cheeks. You've probably called this resilience, but it's simpler than that. A child hasn't yet learned to narrate their pain. They feel it fully, and then they let it go because nothing is telling them to hold on. You, on the other hand, have spent your entire adult life being trained to hold on. Consider what your ancestors needed this system for in the first place. 90 seconds of fear was enough to notice the rustle in the grass, flood the body with energy, and either fight or run. The system was built for acute physical danger, danger that resolved itself one way or another within moments. It was never built for a boss who ignores your email for 3 days, or a relationship ending over a slow accumulation of small disappointments, or a global news feed refreshing every hour with fresh alarm. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between a predator in the grass and a passive-aggressive comment in a group chat. It reacts the same way, and now, instead of a resolution within 90 seconds, you have an open loop that your mind keeps feeding, sometimes for years. And this is where the neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research becomes so important. Barrett has spent her career arguing that emotions aren't simple, hardwired reactions that happen to you. They're constructed in real time by your brain using past experience as raw material, which means the story you tell yourself about a feeling isn't separate from the feeling. It's often what's generating it. When you interpret a racing heart as "I'm being threatened," your brain builds fear. When you interpret the exact same racing heart as "I'm excited," your brain builds something closer to anticipation. Same physiology, different construction, and that construction is happening again. and again every 90 seconds based on the story you keep choosing to tell. So what does it actually look like to let a wave pass instead of rebuilding it? It starts with noticing physically that something is happening. Not, he shouldn't have said that, but my jaw is tight, my chest is hot, my hands want to move. Naming the raw sensation rather than the story attached to it is one of the simplest ways to interrupt the loop. Researchers who study this technique sometimes call it affect labeling, and brain imaging studies have shown something remarkable when people do it. The simple act of putting a feeling into words, this is anger, this is fear, measurably calms activity in the amygdala itself. Language used this way isn't fueling the fire, it's a valve. Then comes the harder part, waiting. 90 seconds is not very long, it's about the length of the chorus of a song. But inside those 90 seconds, if you can resist the urge to justify, defend, replay, or plan your comeback, the chemical storm genuinely passes. What's left afterward is usually smaller and clearer than what you started with. Not because the situation stopped mattering, but because you're finally responding to what's actually in front of you instead of the amplified looping version your mind built on top of it. This doesn't mean grief resolves in 90 seconds, or that a genuine crisis should be shrugged off after a minute and a half. Big losses return in waves again and again for good reason, and each of those waves still follows the same rule: 90 seconds of feeling, then a choice about what comes next. The rule isn't that pain should be brief, it's that each individual wave is brief, and what turns a wave into an ocean is almost always the story running underneath it. Which brings us back to that moment you're in right now. The cutoff in traffic, the wrong text, the old memory that surfaced for no reason at all. What if the next time your chest tightens and your face goes hot, you didn't reach for the story? What if you just let the wave move through you, all 90 seconds of it, and watch what was left standing once it passed? Somewhere in your body right now, a wave is rising. It will crest and it will fall in about the time it takes to read the sentence twice. The only real question left is what you're going to build on top of it.